Hi, and thanks for joining us today at Habanero's latest webinar on achieving richer customer engagement with personalized web experiences. My name is Andrew Wright, and I'm a user experience consultant at Habanero. I like to advocate for smart content and well-planned measurement strategies. As I take you through it today, our webinar will be just under 30 minutes, and after the webinar is finished, there will be about 15 minutes to answer any questions that you might have. So please feel free to submit those questions during the webinar. After a brief introduction to Habanero, I'm going to provide you with a definition of personalization that you can take away and use straight away, an introduction to personalization and why it matters, details on when to invest in personalization, and some steps that you can take when getting started with or evolving an existing personalization plan. And then finally, as I mentioned, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, so send questions our way. So with that, let's get started. For those of you that don't know Habanero, we're a consulting company based in Vancouver, Calgary, and Toronto. Today's webinar is being broadcast from here in Calgary. At Habanero, our mission is to help people and organizations thrive. This is something that we're incredibly passionate about, and it shows up in both the services that we provide to our clients and within our own organization. That said, we're proud to be ranked #1 best medium-sized workplace in Canada by the Great Place to Work Institute. It's pretty exciting to say that this was our 6th year on the list. We believe that technology has an extremely important role to play in building thriving workplaces. It doesn't just happen on its own. And the way that organizations are using technology to deliver information to their customers, their partners, and their employees is evolving. Along with that, people's expectations for websites and portals are evolving in step. We, alongside our clients, are starting to see a lot of opportunities to apply personalization on customer portals, make changes and shifts in how we deliver content and information. Now, as we get into this, I suspect that there may be a few different levels of understanding about what personalization is. So let's make sure that we're all starting on the same page. To do so, I'd like to start with a couple of examples of what personalization is not. Firstly, personalization is not customization. I'm sure that all of you receive at least one email newsletter that starts something like, "Hi so-and-so," and is followed by some generic message full of updates or promotions. And some of you have probably even created these using maybe MailChimp or something like Sitecore Email Campaign Manager. And we're all guilty of it, and we have a way of taking advantage of getting this content out to people. But using a person's name like this is the most basic form of personalization, and we have a special name for it. We call it customization. So here you can see Michelle. Her name is inserted simply with a little variable. So a generic email that's going out to hundreds or thousands of subscribers can be customized using variables like this. I'm using maybe first name or last name, and it makes the message feel a little bit more personal. Customization is useful and relevant to personalized experiences, especially like this one, but in our conversation today, let's take things a little bit further. Before we do, one other item I'd like to get clear on is that personalization, as we're talking about it, shouldn't be confused with configuration either. Configuration is something that gives a user or a visitor some control over the look and feel of the experience. It's typically handled by adjusting settings, tweaking some dials and knobs here or a slider there, and taking some checkboxes. Gmail, for example, allows users to configure their interface with different backgrounds, colors, etc. to make it feel a little bit more like their own space. You can also control things like the spacing between lines, how big or small the text is, basically making it a little bit more personable, but not ultimately making any personalization changes. So again, this is a valuable addition to highly used applications like email, but it's not quite what we're talking about today either. So let's discuss a little bit about what personalization is. I've gone about distilling a number of different definitions down into this one, and I kind of like it. It goes a little something like this. Through technology, personalization enables individually relevant content to be inserted, customized, or suggested based on the user's behavior, preferences, and the details provided. What that basically comes down to is that personalization allows us to put relevant content in front of people, and we suggest it based on a number of things that we can know or learn about them. Personalization really means that the user's experience with your website is increasingly relevant with continued use. The more they use it, the more personable it is. From the user's perspective, this kind of comes down to me, the user, a personalized experience is one that proves increasingly relevant to my interests over time without me having to enter much, if any, information explicitly. So I don't have to fill in forms or tick off boxes. This stuff just seems to sort of happen in the background. It's like personalization is tailored to me. It's about us as the designers and implementers taking what we know about a person and building an experience out of that knowledge that feels tailored to them. It's kind of interesting that across the web, we're moving away from a generic one-size-fits-all website experience towards a personal one that builds relationships between the users and with the brand. Here's an example of how we use personalization to support one of our clients' national campaigns. Now, please note, I've had to abstract this example away a little bit to respect the wishes of our client and not share all of the details and specifics. Okay, so our client was planning a campaign that was going to go out across print, TV, web, out of home, and other media channels all across Canada. Everyone who sees this campaign in any one of these channels is then directed to an identical landing page. More specifically to the same landing page. However, the goal was to deliver targeted messaging to visitors based on the province that they live in. In order to target visitors based on province, we created an easy-to-use framework on the Sitecore platform that allowed authors to compose targeted messages and curate them into personalized landing page experiences. Now, I should note that we use Sitecore because it's a particular platform that accommodates personalization nicely, but this could have been done using other platforms as well. So how exactly does it work? When someone visits the landing page, the system uses a GeoIP lookup service to detect where in the world, and specifically from which province, the visitor is coming from. And then, the appropriate messages are selected and presented. All of this happens in an instant and is invisible to the user. The result of receiving targeted content like this is that visitors feel like the campaign is speaking to their specific concerns rather than offering a diluted generic message. And a person's experience is enhanced because it feels like the site was designed more for them. This landing page has been particularly successful in driving strong engagement in the regions that were targeted, and we've been able to measure and report on the effects of personalization because we built a measurement framework into the experience. That framework tracks the details of how frequently each content chunk is shown, which in-page interactions drive the most engagement, and also gives us plenty of detail about how the different audience segments are engaging with the brand overall. With this campaign, the conditions were appropriate for personalization and ultimately the efforts paid off. But I'd like to note it also brings us to one of the key advantages and one of the major challenges personalization helps us overcome. Content targeting. Personalization really is about content targeting. One of the biggest challenges in marketing and communications is getting the right message to the right audience in a timely fashion. It's a challenge that can be difficult to overcome, and it requires a lot of thoughtful planning. And then UX designers like myself often run into a similar challenge when designing website navigation. And the question becomes, how do we create a frictionless path from the landing page to the specific product or piece of information that a visitor is genuinely seeking? This can be an equally daunting challenge, but it's one that we're always up for. Now, as marketing and communications teams invest a lot of information into crafting and testing the perfect message, alongside UX design teams investing a lot of energy into crafting and testing the site structure and navigation, ultimately it takes the activities of both of these unique skill sets and the expertise that they bring to make personalization work. Personalization is really an extension of both skill sets and is a result of collaboration between all the teams in marketing, communications, and across the design spectrum. So, like I said, personalization is about content targeting. Through thoughtful design, personalization allows you and your company to reach specific audiences with appropriate and timely messaging as well as deliver useful, relevant content to visitors at key moments in their journey. Now, maybe it's obvious, or maybe you're wondering, what are the benefits to the end user? Well, the benefits start with an improved experience on your site. We're all familiar with this, but there's a lot of information out there that people need to weed through on a daily basis as they try to find that one thing that'll satisfy some need or some desire that they have. And when someone arrives on your website, they're immediately trying to decide if you have what they need or not. The faster they find some relevant content, the more likely they are to stick around. And the more relevant content they continue to find, the happier they'll be with their experience. If a visitor has a good experience on your website because it was easier for them to, say, buy a t-shirt or pay a bill or find accurate information on some subject that they're interested in, then they're way more likely to develop trust in your brand, maybe return to your website the next time they have a similar need, and likely even share this awesome experience with their friends. And that helps all of us. If and when you deliver relevant content quickly, maybe using personalization, you begin to give the opportunity to exceed user expectations and elevate customer engagement from a visitor to your website towards building a loyal brand advocate. Now, as personalization improves the user experience, it comes down to the fact that they feel more like the site was designed for them and for their specific needs. So now that we have a bit of a sense of what personalization is, it's time to discuss a little bit about when to invest in it. Here are some things that I think you should consider when determining if personalization is right for your customer portal. So it's a good idea to invest in personalization if you can say that you understand your audience segments well enough to speak to their unique needs. That's really important, especially going forward in some of the steps that follow. You can also say that it's the right time to invest in personalization when you can, as an organization, say it's clear that your audience segments will respond to unique messaging. You know that the segments exist and that they will react differently to different messaging. That's a good indicator that you can move forward with this. Another example that is kind of counter to the previous is you may want to move forward with personalization if you want to test how your audience segments respond to targeted messaging. This may involve a little bit of A/B testing or creating personalized messages for segments that you're not entirely sure how they'll respond, including measurement around that, and then being able to adjust your approach based on it. And then finally, you may want to invest in personalization, or you may be ready to invest in personalization if you have a platform in place to support your needs. It's probably obvious that without sufficient support from your technology, this will be quite difficult. But remember, of these four things, the number one condition that needs to be in place is that you understand your audience segments. And if you don't already understand them, I'd recommend investing the time to figure them out. Here's an example. From my experience, I can tell you that every organization I've ever worked with who initially thought that their target audience was some generic, faceless group of people called the general public, well, they changed their minds after conducting a little bit of user research. With a little research into your users or your customers, you'll likely find that there are unique segments that have varying needs, ones that you can even target to. It doesn't take a lot of research to find this out, but you will be surprised at what you learn. I'd like to pause here for just a second and share something with you that I don't want you to be surprised by after committing to a personalization program. We call it the multiplier effect. So for each audience segment that you identify and want to target, you must create tailored messages for each of them. To help make sense of this, I'm going to give you an example of personalization that we implemented for one of our clients that demonstrates this multiplier effect. We were designing a single introductory overview page. The page was made up of an introduction and 4 sections, each section with its respective headline, body copy, and photos. And it would have been pretty straightforward to create content for this page if we were targeting just one audience. But our client wanted to target 2 specific provinces in Canada with unique messages and then create a separate message for everyone else. This meant they needed to create 3 times more content than a static generic page would have required. That's a pretty big multiplier. Now, remember that each content chunk is made up of 3 or more smaller components as well. This could require a lot of content tinkering to get just right. Now imagine if they had wanted to target each province and territory separately, a multiplier of 12 or 13, depending on how you look at the map. That would have been a lot of content in order to create personalized messages for each and every province and territory. That's the multiplier in effect. Fortunately, in this scenario, some of the content chunks were going to be reused across geographies, so the multiplier here wasn't quite as big. And still, our client has the option to craft a unique message for each of these geographies, and others should they desire it, and they have the option of which messages to include for which audiences. So as you're considering implementing personalization, remember to invest in it only when tailored content truly benefits your audience segments. As you look further into implementing personalization, whether it's for the first time or you're evolving an existing personalization strategy, you want to keep the following activities in mind. So here are the 5 steps. 1. Identify and prioritize your audience segments. Research into your audiences often includes activities like customer user interviews, maybe discussions with marketing and the executive team, as well as an investigation into any analytics data that you have. These inputs can then be pulled together and refined into personas or audience segment profiles that you'll use going forward. 2. Find the sweet spots. Or, what this ultimately means is aligning the opportunities for targeting with your business objectives. So figure out what's the same and what's different about each segment's needs. How do they relate to your website and how they relate to your customer portal? Do the different audiences live in different places? Do they visit at different times or on specific days? Do they always investigate a particular section of the website before taking some action to further their engagement with your brand? It's these differences between the audience segments that make them unique and reveal the opportunities for personalization. The real sweet spots, though, are those differences, those opportunities for personalization that align with your business objectives. Without aligning to your business objectives or organizational outcomes, it's just personalization for the heck of it and isn't really going to further your agenda much. Then we need to create the required content chunks. In order to do so, you want to plan the necessary content chunks that support the goals that you've got outlined. You'll create a content matrix that specifies the copy, the images, and the actions for each audience segment that you're personalizing for. You'll need to prioritize the content that adds the most value, and then prioritize some more. And if you don't feel good enough yet, maybe prioritize one more time, and make sure that you're addressing the items at the very top. You remember the multiplier effect? Well, make sure that the content you're investing in is unique enough that it'll resonate with the end users, so you're not wasting energy creating low-impact content. Number 4, define the rules. We have to specify the different rules and conditions that will determine which audience segment a visitor fits into, and ultimately, how we can deliver them relevant content sooner. The rules and conditions are created based on expected behaviors, preferences, and details about our audience segments. The rules for personalization can be defined based on the sweet spots you've identified earlier, that is, the opportunities for personalization that align with your business objectives. If your business operates differently across locales, you may create rules based on postal code, city, province, or country, for example. Or if you've identified a sweet spot based on the patterns of how a specific audience segment interacts with your website, you may then want to create rules reflecting content that they viewed or purchases they made, or maybe documents that they've downloaded. And you want to be as specific as you can with these rules, but no more. Ultimately, if the more specific you get, the more accurate you'll get. But if you go too far, you'll find that maybe you're missing out on opportunities that you would have had if you were a little bit looser with your rules. So creating these rules can be fun, and it may require a little experimentation to get them just right, but it's definitely worth it. Try and tweak them, lay out the foundation first, experiment with it, and refine it until it feels like it's doing just what you need. Number 5, set goals and track to them. You're taking the time to invest in personalization, and you need to ask yourself, what do you hope to achieve? What expectations do you have about interactions with your website and how they'll change? How will users engage with you differently after this? Outline and capture these goals so that you and your team can talk clearly about what outcomes you're trying to achieve. Socialize these goals so that people are informed and excited about what you're doing. It'll encourage others to buy into your efforts, get behind it, and help you move forward. Once you have all the pieces of the puzzle in place, you can then implement personalization on your website. And remember, as a marketer, communicator, or website manager with certain platforms, you can make these changes to a portal without a deployment. That means no interaction or no dependency on IT or IS. You can get right in there, make changes, get them out into the world as quickly as you can come up with them. And finally, goals don't really count unless you can track them. So you'll need to measure the performance of your personalized content. How is it improving or changing your success metrics? Were we close to our expectations? Were we way off? What do we need to change in order to better align with our goals and our outcomes? You'll learn from these insights. Learn from the measurements that you're taking. Pull them together, model them, turn them into something more meaningful, and draw insight from it. And then refine your approach based on these insights. Make tweaks and adjustments or refactor your approach completely to meet the needs of your business. But make sure all the changes that you're making are moving you closer towards achieving your goals. As you measure, learn, and refine, your personalization plan will continue to improve over time. Now, yes, that's great, it'll improve over time, but you may be wondering, how do I get started now? So, let's jump into that real quick. I recommend starting small. Pick one audience segment with either clear and unique needs, unique perspective, or very clear and obvious motivations, and then focus on them. Ask yourself, where are the opportunities on our website to create a tailored experience for this audience that will really add value to their experience? That's important. I mean, we really want to pick an opportunity that adds value to their experience and improves our overall brand awareness and alignment and get people engaged with us. Once you've done that, carefully craft the content and implement the personalized experience on your website. Set goals or some expectations for what changes and improvements you think will result from this. Is it going to be more signups? Will you have more qualified leads? Will you have a reduction in support calls that frees up those individuals and their time? Will you have more purchases? Or will it just be more quality information consumed on your website? Make sure you set these, clearly capture them, and circulate them so that everyone knows what they are and what they're working towards. And then once your personalized experience is in place, you want to monitor its performance. The specific approach will depend on which analytics tool or tools you're using, but you want to segment the data based on the audience you're targeting and track the changes in their behavior on their website. Ideally, you have a baseline already in place and you can adjust it and measure against that, but if you don't, that will be one of your first steps, is to collect all of this data and begin to establish that baseline so that you can determine how much the behavior is changing over time and whether or not you're moving towards or away from your goals. As you learn from this experiment, you can then tweak the personalized experience and you can begin crafting your next personalization experiment. So start small, build up, continue to evolve over time. So personalization is about delivering individually relevant content to our customers based on their behavior, their preferences, and the details they provide. This allows marketing and communications teams to get the right content in front of the right audience as efficiently as possible, and with the right platform, like I said, without having to ask IT for help. Personalization improves the user experience because visitors feel like the site was designed for them, and this encourages a richer customer engagement with your brand. You want to invest in personalization once you've identified audience segments to tailor content to. This likely means doing some research up front to get clarity on your audiences and their unique needs. The result is better direction for content creation, and you avoid wasting time creating content for audience segments that don't influence your success metrics. To get the most out of personalization, you'll need to adapt your plan over time as you learn more and more about your audiences and as they change. Once you have your plans defined, implement them and measure the results. As you learn what works for your organization, continue to refine your plans and improve upon the personalized experience that you're delivering to your users and to your customers. So that wraps up our session for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd love to open up the floor to some Q&A. This video, this recording actually will be provided to you after the fact, and you're welcome to send any questions or comments you have to myself. My email address is there. It's awright@habaneroconsulting.com. I look forward to hearing a little bit more from you.